So welcome. We are, as you can see, here to talk about change. I'm Jocelyn Kessler. I work in community medicine with the ASPCA. My background, I have a Master of Business Administration from the University of Colorado at Denver, and I've been working in operations with the ASPCA for about 8 years. Before that, I worked in several different retail environments. I managed a Target store. I was the director of operations for a chain of consumer electronics stores out west. And so I've had a lot of experience with a lot of changes in my career, as I know you have too. So it should be fun talking today through some, if you have some existing problems that you're sort of noodling through, it'll be interesting to talk through that. Or just to give you some tools to prepare you. But I want to hear about who's here. I stole that off the internet, and it's a little bit blurry, but that's super funny. So who are you in this room? Who are like top of your organization, executive director, on the executive leadership team? Okay, so there's a handful of you who are doing a lot of changing, I'm sure, in your organizations. Now, what about sort of middle managers, directors, senior managers, Great, great, great. And how many of you supervise frontline staff? Okay, so a lot of you. And volunteers? Okay, volunteers can be some of the hardest to change on, so this will be interesting. It is. They're very dedicated and passionate about the way things are handled in your organization, and so we can't leave them out of a change management conversation for sure, or you do at your own peril. So why even talk about this? Why is this room full? Nobody likes it. Why? Yes, but why don't they like it? It's not comfortable. It's not comfortable. What I read recently was it's actually not true that people don't like change. If you want proof, look at the fact that all of you were born and probably mostly like your parents willingly brought you into their homes, and because some change people willingly sign up for, right? And it's just like on your head, crazy change, and you're like, yes, I want this, right? Some changes people are really excited about, some not so much. And so a lot of the changes that we are imposing upon people are ones that may or may not be well received, right? So it really depends on the type of change and how it's implemented, whether or not people like it. And you have to change. Those of you who run organizations, if you stand still, what's going to happen? The bus is going to run you over, right? You will not be able to survive with all the things that happen in animal welfare, with funding, with animal care, with community, the changes that are happening in your community, and just the landscape. You cannot stand still. And so it's absolutely imperative to your survival as an organization, and to those people in that organization, they have to come with you or else you can't go. So 2 out of 3 transformational efforts fail is the statistics. So when you hear about these huge mergers, big companies like merging with other companies and these big changes, tons of those fail. When organizations completely do a major effort or initiative, lots of those are unsuccessful. And so the risk is high because the expense is high. Even for kind of medium-sized changes, the risk is high. So you want to hit the bullseye as much as possible with your change efforts and get as close as you can to hitting it right. So the 3 things we're going to talk about in here are just a simple framework to support change and kind of all types of changes. We're also going to talk about transitions, which is different than change. Change process is a technical process with steps. Transitions are humans and what people are going through when you create a change in your organization. They're both super important. And then third, we want to get a little bit of practice, if you want, have a little bit of practice using a template for any change effort that you're thinking about or you can even have a hypothetical one or a post-mortem on one that you've already done, whatever you like. So what's on your plate right now? You know, think about a change that you have coming up, or maybe one that you're up to your eyeballs in as we speak. And using the worksheet that you've got, or not, you don't have to use your worksheet, you could just jot down, like, what's a brief description? What's the essence of that change? What are you doing with that change? And if you can't articulate it in a couple of sentences, that's a little bit of a red flag. So you don't have to admit it, but that's a little bit of a red flag. If you don't know exactly what that change is and the purpose of it and where you're headed, you're at point A and you're going to point B, if you can't articulate that, you might want to spend some time after you leave here today getting really clear about what that change is, what's the reason for it, and where you're going. So just a couple seconds. Think about that. All right. So this is the first time I've put a picture of myself in a presentation. So what I did to prepare this workshop is I looked at a bunch of models. This is Harvard Business Review on change management. There's a bunch of different models in here by scholarly, changey people. And what I found when I was researching this, because I also looked at this guy. Woo! This is one of my favorites. If you're going through a really big change, this book is amazing. It's a great tool for a book club if you guys are getting ready to go on a change. It's great if you don't know what to do. Like, you know you need to change. Yes? Oh, sorry. It's called Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard. It's Chip and Dan Heath. And it's in my slides at the end also, and so you will have that. But what's cool is that they do have online on their website. If you get the book, you can go on their website, and they have these little workbooks, and they have a lot of just interesting, thought-provoking ideas for bigger changes. We don't go through that many of those. And chances are, in your day-to-day, you might have some of those in your organization over time, but I feel like that's not as much what we're tackling in the day-to-day. And so that's why I picked the model that I did to share with you and to put on the worksheet. It's not a perfect model. It's not going to work just beautifully for every situation. But I think what I like about it is that it does fit for the smaller to medium-sized changes that you tend to go through, fairly regularly in an organization. And it just gives you a little bit of preparation so that you're winging it a little bit less. Or it can give you a lot of preparation. So it's a model that's really flexible depending on the size of the change, how many people are involved, how many people it touches, etc. So it's called the DICE model, and it is by these guys, The Hard Side of Change Management. So this book, this blue book has like 5 or 6 different articles in it, and this is just one of the articles. So it's not the whole book if you want to read about it. It's just one section of the book. And the first thing is the duration. And so being really realistic about the duration. When you have who's undergone a change that didn't go very well? Why? What's a reason?
We implemented days that we would be closed to the public but open for appointments because the staff indicated they wanted more time to enrich the dogs and they could get all this stuff done, and nothing was getting done, and we just reduced our adoption numbers. So it in theory was a good idea, but the actual implementation of it.
Implementation was a little rocky, maybe not planned as carefully, and all the possible sort of things that could have gone wrong identified up front and handled. What did you say?
Staff buy-in isn't there.
So staff buy-in is not there. And staff buy-in is an interesting one, I think, that as we go along, hopefully there will be some ideas to help with that.
Lack of communication and a lot of moving parts.
Lack of communication and a lot of moving parts. Absolutely. Those are probably the complexity of the change is often underestimated. Often underestimated. Rarely do you over-prepare for a change. It can happen. But definitely communication is, we're going to talk about what these guys recommend in all of their research is what they found as best practices with communication. And I just cringe when I read it. Even when I reread it, even though I made this presentation, I always cringe because I'm 100% guilty of under-communicating almost every time. And I like to talk. So, being really realistic about the duration and how long it will take, I think, is really important. And realism is also important because you can't just, you don't want the change to last much, much, much longer than it needs to. There's good reasons to get through and get to the other side. But do be realistic and allocate the appropriate amount of time to implement the change if you can. There's going to be unforeseen circumstances. But if you can, be really realistic and ask for input from other people on what they think based on other things and other sort of resource strains that you might have in your organization. Integrity of the team. They just wanted to call it a word, this model. Integrity makes no sense. It's really just the team that's participating in the change. But I think didn't sound as good. So it's really about the team. And does the project team that you have working on the change, do they have the right skills and the bandwidth to deliver the results in the time frame that you have chosen? So once you've decided how long you think it should take, based on the people that are involved in it, do they actually have the ability to deliver in that time frame that you identified? And then commitment, have senior leaders and impacted employees bought in? So you mentioned buy-in. And it really, really, really starts at the top. If you're in the middle of the organization and you're trying to implement a change, start up here and then go to your frontline staff. Because if your senior leaders don't care about it, chances are you can beat the drum as much as you want, as hard as you want, but if nobody cares about it except you, it's going to be a really long slog. And then effort. How much additional work will this change require? And am I actually being realistic about it? And do I have enough staff and resources to undergo this? And what these guys said, and we'll go into each one of these, but what these guys said is that there actually is a limit to how much extra work you can put on someone before your change really starts to suffer. So we'll just dive right into the model. So first off, the D in DICE is duration. So identifying for your change with your change team, which we'll talk about who needs to be on the team, but what are the key achievements or milestones that need to be achieved in this change? And what steps, specific steps, activities, tactics have you identified to get you there? And they need to be pretty granular eventually. They need to be pretty granularly identified and listed out in order for you to adequately assess how long or estimate how long you think it's going to take. And so what are those tasks? On the change, if you did identify a change on your worksheet or on your piece of paper, what are some of the tasks or milestones on your change? And that is going to tell you, when you add all of that up, and who your streams are of who's doing it, what it's realistically going to take, how long. And then how often will the team meet to report on progress? And this was really interesting. The researchers in this article found that frequency is a key indicator of success. The frequency that the team has to report out on where they are with their tasks and achieving their milestones is absolutely directly correlated to how successful the change was in all of their studies and case studies that they did. And so what they said was, if you have a pretty complex change, you've got to meet often, every couple of weeks, every week, if it's complicated. That whole team, just at least to report out on what are the challenges, if they didn't hit their milestone or if they didn't complete their task, why not? What's the roadblock? As the leader of the change, when your team is faced with roadblocks, what's your job? Figure out how to get it out of there. Your job as a leader is to remove those obstacles to them getting through the change. And you can't do it if you don't even know about it, right? If you don't know there's a roadblock, and then you have dependencies, so this has to be done before this has to be done before this has to be done, and this roadblock occurred down here and you don't find out about it for 2 months, you've got a problem. And so it really requires commitment to the change, whoever's leading that change. It requires a lot of commitment. So on your worksheets, I just put space on the change worksheet to sort of expound upon this, of what's in that change. What are the major things? And then within those, when you're actually planning the change, what are those little sub-steps? It's like project management, if you've taken a project management class. Similar to that, but you don't, depending on the level of the change, you might not need to go that crazy, but you do need to break it down. So your team. This is the I in the model. So you really want to choose your team pretty carefully. You want a very high functioning team. If this change is important, and most of them are, you want to have a pretty high functioning team. And you don't want everyone on that team, though, doesn't necessarily have to be super excited about exactly what you want to do, right? Or the way that you want to do it. So having a little bit of dissent in the ranks might be good for you. So it might be good for your change effort. It might lead you to some better options, better solutions. So don't necessarily have all your favorites on the team, because all of your favorites usually tell you what you want to hear, and you want to avoid that if it's important. And then once you've looked at and you've got your diverse group, go back to the D, duration, and all of those tasks and milestones and figure out, is this team able to do all of those things? Do they have the skills? Can they make decisions if they run into problems? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skills to be able to handle this change effort within this team? If not, you might have to, which hopefully very rarely, bring in somebody from the outside to help you with that gap. Sometimes there's a legal component and you need an attorney to fill in a gap. Sometimes you need an engineer or an architect. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you might need in your change, but hopefully you don't need, a consultant or somebody from outside to tell you what to change and how to change it. Hopefully for most of your changes, you have that skill set inside. And if you look hard and if you look around, you'll probably find that you have more skills than you think. So allow yourself ample time and space for the change. And empower the team to make decisions and speak up. Because if it all sounded great, like in your case of closing down to surgeries and the team's going to be working on behavior and enrichment things, if it all sounds great and after the first few days somebody notices, but they're afraid to tell you because you were so jazzed about it, it was your idea, you were on board, you told them just to do it, and you didn't leave that door open for dissent, what might happen? Pretending could happen, right? We're pretending everything's fine. It's all good. And then when you're looking at reporting in 3 months, you're like, what happened? Or you're booked out 3 months for surgery slots. What happened? And adoptions are not getting out faster, which was the plan. So really important that the team feels confident that they can push back on you and some of the decisions that you made if they don't work, and course correct early rather than late. So if you are playing along with a worksheet, for the change that you need, do you have the people? Do you have the skills to be able to make this change happen in-house? Do you need to hire some temp staff to fill in for them while they're working on this change? What needs to happen in order to be successful. You might have to delay your change, if you can. You might have to delay your change while you get this sorted out. Commitment, super important, right? So we talked about senior leadership fully endorsing a change. I have been through change efforts where 2 senior leaders disagreed. One of them cared, one of them didn't care. And if you're the one heading up the change, it's valuable probably just to check, just to verify where people are in your organization at the top level about the change, and how vested are they in a specific course, and do they have different visions for that. And so what could you do if you sense that senior leadership was not 100% on board? Or maybe it's your board. In some of our cases, there's disagreement. I know that's a whole nother can of crazy. But what could you do if you sense that maybe not everybody was as jazzed about the change as you are, or maybe your leader who's asking you to do the changes? What might you be able to do about it? Yeah?
Feedback as to why they're not, or is there something that's missing? And I think transparency is really important, and people being able to communicate a common goal and what that is and how to get there.
Yes, absolutely. So asking for feedback. What is it about the change that is stuck in your craw? And what transparency is needed between the senior leaders and you and your team? Do they want more frequent updates? Would that help them feel more secure? Are they just wanting to invest in a pilot rather than a permanent change? That's one. I feel like I should actually have my pilot's license at this point at the ASPCA, because we do lots and lots of trials and before committing to something permanently. We do a lot of testing. And that way the staff knows we're going to try it for this period of time, and then we're going to evaluate, and we're going to tweak. We'll do it for this period of time, evaluate, and tweak. Sometimes that's easier for the people above you to handle, and it's easier for the people reporting to you who actually have to do the change to handle. They're not, you don't have to buy it today, right? You can just take it home and try it. You can return it if you don't like it. So that can be really helpful. Leaders can communicate the reason for the change and why it's important. So this is key. So yes, we need to make this change. Everybody knows we need to make this change, but we've got this and we've got that. Have you been in that situation where it's like, yes, people are on board and they're going, yes, we can do this, they understand it, right? But they don't really get why it's more urgent than the thing in front of them. Because they have an animal in front of them that needs to get adopted or spayed or euthanized or whatever. And that thing that's in front of them right now, or a client who's angry, who's yelling, or a staff member who's upset or calling out sick. And you've got all of these things that are coming at you that you don't necessarily control. And so a sense of urgency is absolutely critical to the success of a bigger change. People have to sense, okay, I understand that you want this change, but we could do it in 2020. Really? Do we have to implement this now? It's hard. We're busy. It's inertia. Very hard. So getting that sense of urgency, that's what your senior leaders are for. This is a really important thing, and we might have to put off other things in order to make this happen. Communication plan, which you mentioned, is really key. Who are you having to communicate to? Who are your constituents with this change? In your case, who were your constituents? Who needed to know what was going on? The public? Yeah, who else? Volunteers who are coming in and doing recovery and things. Who else? The staff involved, impacted staff. Who else? Yeah, yeah. So some public who wanted surgery and some public who wanted to adopt, you might have different, different communication plans for your website. You might have somebody in a totally different department who used your facility on a certain day for a certain reason, and that's going to displace them. Like, there's all kinds of ripple effects with the change that the more you can identify, you're not going to anticipate every single thing, or you'll never change anything if you try to anticipate every single thing that could go wrong. But knowing who needs to be communicated and what in the right amount of communication at the right time, it's worth thinking about in advance before you're in the middle of a major communication snafu or gap. So just thinking about it some in advance without, like I said, don't wind yourself around the axle planning, but just think about it. What's my communication plan? Who's going to be in charge of that? Who do we need to talk to? It'll help you not step in it a little bit. And then publicly supporting the change again and again and again. What these guys found is that if you think that you implemented a change because you sent out your memo announcing the change with all the details, appendix A through Z, of exactly what the change is, then you go on to your next thing. Chances are, just because you think it is so, it is not so. And it might not stick. It can backslide. A change is like nurturing something that's alive and that can go one way or another anytime on you. You really need to nurture it until it can walk all by itself. And then you can step away. And nurturing it, because you're the leader. People look to you and your example. And if you don't continue to publicly support the change, look for those wins. Celebrate the wins that came about from the change. Make sure people know that the pain was worth it. They'll be a little bit less resistant the next time that you ask them to trust you and go through this, walk down this path with you again. So again, your worksheets, what you have space for is just drafting that justification and what communication channels make sense. What communication channels do you have available to you in your organization? What ways do you talk to folks? Just yell them out. Email. Social media. Meetings. Food is a great way to talk people into changing. You use what? What was that?
It's an application for your phone. It's like a messaging. It's called Slack.
Oh, Slack, yes.
Different channels, behavioral, animal care.
Cool, cool. So you guys can like sort of chatter all day long through Slack. That's awesome.
Is it spelled S-L-A-C?
Yep.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Slack is an app, like an instant messaging app
You can also
that,
put it on a regular computer.
that has groups. Yeah, it can be on a computer too. Yes. Yep. So if you've made efforts at different ways of communicating and you're still not getting through, are they still disagreeing with you or they just didn't hear the message? A lack of what? A lack of reading the sources of communication. All of our staff reads every email I send out. I'm sure of that. All the way to the bottom. All the way to the bottom. Yeah. So you really have to plan for that. So if you know that you have staff that are on their feet all day, they're not, I mean, Slack is actually a good way to communicate. The ASPCA Animal Hospital uses something similar to that where I think they use Yammer. Do they still use that or do they get rid of it? A workplace, yeah, we have a new thing. It's like Slack. We use, it's the Facebook, professional version of Facebook called Workplace. That's what we just switched to. Thanks, Ariel. I was talking about you in the last session. You missed it. I don't know if you have to pay for that. Probably. Probably. It's Facebook. You're paying one way or another. I don't know exactly how. I don't know exactly how, but there are certainly apps that will do this kind of thing for people on the move. The thing is that you can get a bunch of noise. So all of your channels can be good for different things. I would say that when you are rolling out a change, depending on who it impacts, how much the impact will be felt and how much you know people are going to be concerned about it will tell you how much you need to slow down. Something like workplace chat is not going to get you through a reorganization, obviously, right? It's not going to get you through a major new disease prevention protocol in your kennels. You're not going to send out a text message for things like that. So you can support it along the way. Hey, great job with using the triple disinfectant in kennel 17, you know, Derek. That's amazing. That's a great way to publicly support the change again and again and again, is to recognize staff specifically for adhering to that change that you put out. They should be rewarded and recognized for embracing the change, right? And doing the behaviors that you want them to do. That's what that kind of Slack application is great for, and what Workplace is great for. Shout outs and things like that. If you actually want someone to change their behavior and they don't wanna, that's not gonna work. So you need to plan it out. What else do you have available to you? Somebody said lunch meetings. So you have face-to-face, right? You have face-to-face meetings. Have you ever known in your heart when you make a change that there's one person who's going to hate it? What do you do with that guy? Let's call him Vinny in ASPCA because his name is Vinny. What do you do with him?
I usually, just kind of have a one-on-one meeting with them and sit down and say, okay, what is your hesitation? What's going on? And then I kind of make it the deal.
Yeah.
Saying, you know what? This isn't written in stone, so we're going to try it. Just give me time give the team time to see how this is going to work out.
Yep.
If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
We've tried things in the shelter, and it's just like, you know what? Let's give it a go. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. What are we losing?
Yep.
Part of it might work, part of it might not work, and then we all reassess and do it again. And I usually have pretty good buy-in from that. There's like that time limit that you're saying, okay, we're going to look at this over the next month, and we're going to see what's going on. And inevitably, I had the biggest detractor being the biggest supporter of what we did, because they were like, I didn't think that would work. I didn't think it could happen. And look at this, like, oh my God, my life is so much easier. And it's like then when you get that level of buy-in.
See, that is super powerful, because your detractor, again, you're Vinny. So your Vinny, you know that you have to invest something different in Vinny. You have to use a different communication channel with Vinny than you might use with staff, because staff is in all different places, right? So you might have to use a different communication channel. And we're going to talk about transitions also. And so when we get there, we'll make some more, bolster that up a little bit. But you know that you have to use different communication channels for different people. And if you can anticipate some of that, you can save yourself some pain. So effort, people are going to resist it if they just flat out can't do it. And they're set up for failure. So estimate the additional work involved. Do the best that you can. Obviously, stuff happens. But the research from these guys estimates that you can add about 10% temporarily to someone's full plate before the change falls apart. So, about 10%. If you're going to ask somebody to take on 30, 40, 50% more work while the change is happening, you're probably in trouble. That's when you might need to bring in some other resources, even temporarily. So again, when you're planning this change, who are the groups? How much more is it going to add to their plate, and for how long? If it's going to be more than 10%, think of a strategy. So what we talked about was a framework. The framework is just a tool. Those are hard, planning, tasks, estimate, time, resources, team, skills. Those are all fine and good, but you can have all of that in place and your change still dies, even though you did a great job with planning. So transitions are what people go through with change. So these are the hard things that people go through. So the difference between a change and a transition is changes are differences just in how you work, how you do the work that you do. Transitions are psychological processes that people experience when they're faced with a change and in response to it. And individuals have different levels of tolerance for change. The exact same thing that Vinny thinks is the end of the world, Steve might think, that sounds great. Just let me know what you need. And you're like, why can't everybody be like you? So begin by answering these questions. So what specifically is changing? What specifically is changing? Not what is the fear and what might happen and what everybody's scared about and all of the like ghouls and goblins in people's minds, but what is specifically changing? What will actually be different because of the change, and who will lose what as a result of the change? Start there. With your communication plan, with your transition plan, that's what you really need to know, because that tells you where you need to focus the most energy managing transitions. So the 3 phases are, the beginning is the ending. So the ending is what was, then you're in the neutral zone, then you're in the beginning. So we start with the end. What's no longer happening? So in the ending, people become, and this is with fairly major changes usually, like this isn't like, you know, we're opening at 9 instead of 10. Sometimes it is, but this is generally a fairly major change where people become really freaked out, imagining all the terrible things that are going to happen. Animals are going to die. How many times have you heard that? If we do this, animals are going to die. It's very, very visceral for people sometimes. What you want to change is they are terrified. And in our work, animals do die, you know? So it's not that ridiculous that people are going through this, and we do have to recognize that this is totally natural and normal and have a plan for it. So they're all weirded out, or maybe it's not the animals, maybe it's their coworkers. Somebody's going to lose their job. Someone's going to have to really change their job. Somebody's going to make less money. They're not going to be able to pay their rent, and they're going to be out on the street. Like, people get really worried about stuff. And then honor what has been lost. Like, don't come in with an attitude about what was and what country bumpkins they were before you got there and saved them from themselves. Because that is a big mistake, I think, that people who are brought in to change an organization, they often skip the step of honoring what was. The people got there to where they are today for a reason, because they're competent, because they're good, because they're committed, because they're dedicated. The landscape has changed, and so we have to change. It's not that they did something wrong. Sometimes it is, but it's not that they did something wrong, and that's the reason they have to change, right? It's not because they're incompetent, lazy, whatever it is, or because the organization just didn't know better, right? It's because the landscape has changed, and we have to change too. And allow people time to grieve, but not too much. Not too much time. If they wallow too long in that place, you might not be able to get them back. Avoid disparaging the old ways, as we said, and encourage forward movement and letting go. Oh, sorry. So in the ending, these are the kinds of emotions, real emotions that people are experiencing. But again, don't be scared, because not everybody's going to be there. You know, again, everybody's going to look at it a little bit differently. Some people will even be excited. The neutral zone is when people realize we left shore and we're not going back to that island. It's over. That old way is gone. And now, but I can't quite reach the new place yet, right? So you're in this really limbo situation, and people can be angry, frustrated. They can act out. They can do some things that are very undesirable in the workplace, as you see over here. And you need to be patient, and again, just focus on moving forward and not on the past. And optimists should continue to be encouraged. So don't forget about those people who are happy. right? Don't just leave them out there alone, like, you know, singing your tune. You know, really support them and encourage them, because they are a great, great support system for you and the team of getting forward, moving forward. Thank you. So don't forget about those people and keep thanking them, encouraging them to, you know, to thrive in this environment and to get to the other shore with you. This is the time, this neutral zone. What I thought was really interesting about what this, this article, I'll have the name of it for you at the end also, but what these guys said was that the neutral zone is where you get a lot of creativity and discovery, because you've like torn down one house, you haven't quite built the next house, and so there's a lot of ideas and things that come up in this neutral zone that you want to be able to take advantage of. So be ready to grab those and let those optimists and even maybe some of those angry people run with them and do some things and make some changes, because some of that change that you planned for, you might have some unplanned opportunities for change and build on the momentum that you're getting from this big change, that once you pry everybody loose from the old way, you've got some openings, right? And you've got some ways that you can do some other stuff. So don't be afraid to kind of pile on if you think the time is right. And now the third phase is the beginning. So the beginning, you've landed on the shore of the new place. You're through your change, right? And you have the people who are still with you, and hopefully that's all of them, but sometimes it's not. The people who are still with you have chosen to commit to that new way and participate. And now that they're more comfortable, they're going to want to go. They're going to be irritated with the shortcomings of the change, the inefficiencies. They're going to want to button those up. And so you got to be ready for that too. And that's why it's like change kind of comes from change, because you didn't think of everything, right? When you made that change, you didn't think of everything. There's more that needs to be done in order to make it really awesome. So that's what you're doing with the beginning. And so you have this acceptance, commitment, trust, excitement about the new stuff. You know, you've been able to celebrate wins. You know, building in celebrations for wins is really key. And when you're communicating your support for that change and support for the people who are supporting that change, that's part of what you can do. More animals are getting adopted faster. You know, we wanted our length of stay to be this. We knocked it out of the park. You know, euthanasia's down. Whatever it is that your change was for, foot traffic is up. This social media thing is working, you know, whatever that change is. You look for those early wins and talk about them, talk about them, talk about them. So the furthering your knowledge part, as I said, so switch is more for really big changes, and also when you're just not sure what to do. You know, the landscape is changing, something's going on in your community and animal welfare as a whole. Something's going on and you're not sure what to do, and it's going to be a big transformation. I would highly recommend this one. And the model works for those sort of, you know, restructures, shifts in responsibilities, rolling out a new program, things like that. You can use the DICE model. Regardless, you have transitions to think about, so just don't lose sight of those transitions, and doing a little bit of planning for those is way better than nothing. And again, all this stuff will be online, so if you want the worksheet and you didn't get one, you can have it. Thank you. Thank you.